Terry Rozier's legal team insists he's innocent. The NBA says it found no wrongdoing. But the federal government sees it differently, and so does much of the public. Amidst this legal chaos, Sophie Cunningham stepped into the spotlight with a bold and emotionally charged critique, not just of Rozier, but of the leagues and institutions that enable this kind of contradiction.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Her post didn't mince words. How can a player under federal indictment be rewarded with millions while others doing honest work go unnoticed and underpaid? Her argument struck deeper than just legalities. It was about the optics, the message, and the values being upheld. In the shadow of federal charges and league denials, the NBA's handling of Rozier's situation raises profound concerns about consistency and credibility. Cunningham's remarks highlight the tension between legal innocence and public accountability, a tension that professional sports often struggle to navigate. With congressional hearings underway and fan backlash growing, this controversy exposes more than just internal flaws. It challenges the very standards by which leagues govern themselves. Cunningham's stance, whether embraced or rejected, forces a reckoning with the blurred lines between ethics, law, and loyalty in modern sports. Sophie Cunningham didn't hold back. With just 3 words, "Life isn't fair," she sparked a wildfire that scorched its way through sports Twitter, basketball forums, and mainstream media. The outrage? That NBA player Terry Rozier is still collecting his full $26 million salary while facing federal gambling charges. Not a fine, not a suspension, not even a delay. Just a steady stream of millions, uninterrupted. And Sophie wasn't just reacting to the paycheck. She was reacting to the principle, or the complete lack of it. While everyday people, from food pantry workers to military service members, put in exhausting work for a fraction of that pay, Rozier remains a millionaire on the league's dime, under the full weight of serious federal accusations. Now, let's be clear, this isn't about guilt or innocence. Rozier hasn't been convicted, but the charges? They're federal, not local, not civil. Federal gambling charges are not a minor issue. They don't come out of nowhere. And yet, the NBA's internal investigation concluded that Rozier did nothing wrong. That contradiction is exactly what Cunningham and much of the public is struggling to understand. Because how does a league investigation find innocence when federal prosecutors find probable cause? It's not the first time a league has conducted an internal review and landed at a convenient conclusion. But this time, the contrast couldn't be sharper. The NBA gave Rozier the all-clear. The feds filed charges. So either one side missed something big or one side doesn't want to see it. That disconnect is where the real damage begins. For Sophie, that $26 million check represented everything that's broken about professional sports. Not just the pay gap, though that's certainly part of it, but the hypocrisy, the selective outrage, the institutional silence that kicks in only when the player in question is too valuable to lose. And the timing? Couldn't be worse for the NBA. Cunningham's post came just as the league was under the microscope. Literally, with congressional hearings examining league accountability, transparency, and ethics. So while NBA executives were assuring lawmakers that everything is under control, one of their own players was being federally charged and still being paid like nothing happened. You can't buy better irony. Cunningham's anger wasn't just righteous, it was strategic. Her comments added pressure at a time when the NBA was already fumbling with the spotlight pointed directly at them. It exposed the league's tendency to lean on internal reviews as a shield, even when serious legal investigations are playing out in real time. That clash between legal reality and league narrative is what has everyone asking, who actually gets held accountable? And when? Because if Rozier's charges were minor or ambiguous, maybe this reaction would be overblown. But they're not. Federal charges come with weight. The kind of weight that can end careers. The kind of weight that could change the league's image overnight, if they were willing to confront it. But instead, the NBA did what it always seems to do when one of its stars is in trouble: stall, shield, and spin. The league's stance is simple. Rozier is innocent until proven guilty. And yes, that's how due process works. But leagues have never been shy about suspending players for less. Internal codes of conduct exist for a reason, and they're supposed to go beyond courtroom guilt. But not this time. This time, the rules bent. So when Sophie Cunningham compared Rozier's continued earnings to the wages of troops and food pantry workers, she wasn't trying to make it political. She was drawing a line between what sports should represent, integrity, fairness, accountability, and what they've actually become, PR machines that protect profit over principle. That's what turned her post into a flashpoint. People weren't just reacting to Rozier. They were reacting to the system that protects Rozier, a system that offers full salaries to players facing federal gambling charges, but turns a blind eye to the athletes pushing for change. A system that promotes its stars while sidelining the ones who speak out. And let's talk about that pay gap for a second, because it's not just a numbers issue, it's a value issue. Rozier is making $26 million this year. That's more than most entire WNBA teams combined. And while women athletes are doing interviews, campaigning for visibility, and shouldering the emotional labor of growing their league, players in the NBA are getting paid generational wealth, even when they're under indictment. It's not just unfair, it's insulting. And when Cunningham made her frustration public, she didn't just stir up debate. She put a spotlight on every structural problem that's been bubbling under the surface. But the chaos didn't stop there. Cunningham also weighed in on player empowerment, arguing that stars like Caitlin Clark should have a stronger voice in team decisions. And that opened another can of worms. Supporters agreed. Clark's presence has elevated viewership, media coverage, and revenue. So why shouldn't she have influence? Why shouldn't she be involved in shaping her team's future? But critics weren't buying it. They pointed to performance inconsistencies and pushed back against the idea of giving the kind of power to any one player, especially so early in their career. The pushback was loud. But again, the double standard was louder. Male stars in the NBA have been wielding influence for years. LeBron, KD, Steph, these players have shaped coaching staffs, trades, and even front office moves. But when a woman suggests a rising WNBA star deserves a seat at the table, suddenly it's a threat to team dynamics. The issue isn't whether player empowerment is good or bad. It's who's allowed to have it. And Cunningham calling that out, alongside the Rozier scandal, was like ripping the curtain off a rigged stage. Suddenly, everything felt exposed. The disparity in treatment, the convenient silence, the protective PR bubbles built around valuable men, the endless scrutiny dumped on outspoken women. All it was out in the open. And now, the public is watching. Rozier's case hasn't gone away. The federal charges still stand. And while the NBA continues to pretend like its internal process is enough, people are asking harder questions. What's the point of internal investigations if they don't line up with real-world outcomes? What's the value of integrity if it's only applied selectively? Why do leagues claim to stand for justice, equity, and fairness, only to backtrack when it involves money or a marquee name? And what happens the next time? What happens if Rozier is convicted? What happens if more players are implicated? What happens when fans finally decide they're done being told to ignore contradictions that are playing out in plain sight? The NBA may have hoped this would be just another headline, a temporary mess, a story that fades. But Sophie Cunningham made sure that won't happen. Her frustration cut deeper than just a viral tweet. It became a rallying cry for every athlete tired of being told to sit down and stay quiet. Because this isn't just about sports. It's about who gets protected, who gets punished, and what it says about the institutions we keep watching, following, and funding. And it turns out the fans have had enough. So let's keep the conversation going. Do you think Rozier should still be getting paid in full? Is the NBA's internal process broken? And is Sophie Cunningham justified in calling out the hypocrisy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like if you're tired of the excuses. Share if you think leagues need a serious accountability check. And hit that subscribe button, because the meltdowns are only getting messier. We've talked about the money. We've talked about the hypocrisy. We've even talked about the massive chasm between what's legally fair and what's morally outrageous. But we haven't talked enough about the why. Why does this keep happening? Why are leagues like the NBA still allowed to operate like they're above it all, answering only to themselves, issuing internal findings, and moving on like federal charges are just minor inconveniences? Why does accountability only seem to apply when it's easy to enforce? Sophie Cunningham's outrage wasn't about dunking on Rozier personally. It wasn't even about his guilt or innocence. It was about the system, a system that tells fans one thing, then does the complete opposite behind the scenes. Because if the NBA wants to promote itself as a league of values, of community, of responsibility, then it needs to act like it. And that means not just investigating allegations when a scandal breaks, but actually taking a stand when the results don't line up with reality. Let's look at what we know. The federal government, whose job it is to investigate complex financial and legal violations, filed charges. That's not based on rumors. That's not TMZ or some angry Reddit thread. That's the Department of Justice. They don't move unless they've got serious evidence. Meanwhile, the NBA says, "We looked into it. All good." That kind of mismatch shakes public trust. It also raises a dangerous precedent. Because if leagues only apply discipline when it's convenient, or when it won't hurt their bottom line, then what are those rules even for? This is where Sophie's voice matters. She didn't need to drop a think piece or stage a press conference. She just sent a message. 3 words, "Life isn't fair." And everyone knew exactly what she meant. Because deep down, people have known for a long time that sports leagues are selective about justice. But it's different when an athlete puts it in plain sight. When someone in the game refuses to go along with the PR spin. Cunningham's comments didn't just go viral. They gave people permission to stop pretending. To say, wait a second, why is this guy still getting paid? Why do these investigations always seem to clear the right players? Why is fairness always up for debate when money's involved? That's why this story matters. Not just because of one contract, but because of what it says about how we treat power, money, and accountability. And to make things worse, Sophie didn't just call out one scandal. She pulled back the curtain on an entire culture. A culture where women athletes are paid a fraction of their male counterparts and still held to a higher behavioral standard. A culture where star players can steer team decisions behind the scenes. But if a woman suggests the same thing, it's disruptive. A culture where internal investigations are just another form of crisis management. That last one, that's the kicker. Because internal investigations aren't about justice. They're about control. They give leagues a way to say, "We're handling it," without actually handing anything over. They avoid external accountability. They keep the narrative tidy. And they allow the people with the most power to decide how and if someone is punished. In Rozier's case, the NBA's version of handling it was to quietly clear him, keep him on the court, and let that $26 million roll in. And the message that sends couldn't be clearer. If you're valuable enough, you don't get held to the same standard. You don't get suspended. You don't get sidelined. You get protected. That's not justice. That's branding. And Sophie Cunningham wasn't going to let it slide. She's part of a league where players fight every day for visibility, for pay, for respect, and then get told to be grateful for crumbs. Where a viral moment might boost your exposure, but it won't boost your salary. Where speaking out often means risking your own future. So when she speaks up, she's doing what so many athletes don't feel safe enough to do. She's holding the mirror up to a system that only pretends to care. And people noticed. Because the outrage over Rozier's salary isn't just about legal ethics. It's about the kind of inequality that fans are starting to reject. It's about the way leagues use justice language, investigation, integrity, conduct standards, but only when it suits them. If Rozier had been a benchwarmer, someone without a name, a brand, a highlight reel, you think he'd still be drawing a paycheck while facing federal charges? Not a chance. That's the real problem here. It's not just that the rules bend. It's that they only bend for some. And that double standard doesn't stop at the money. It bleeds into everything, from who gets influenced to who gets believed, to who gets silenced when they speak up. Cunningham's comments about Caitlin Clark being more involved in team decisions, That wasn't some ego-fueled power play. That was a larger argument about how star players, especially in women's leagues, are rarely allowed the same input as their male counterparts. And the backlash was swift. Because as soon as a woman athlete even hints at wanting more say, people start panicking about team chemistry or coaching authority. But in the NBA, star influence is just part of the game. It's celebrated. It's expected. It's even marketed. The disconnect is exhausting. People want to pretend the playing field is level, that all athletes are treated equally. But this situation proves what we already knew. The system isn't just flawed, it's built on imbalance. Rozier's case isn't an anomaly. It's a reflection of what happens when institutions protect their stars instead of their standards. When money matters more than ethics. When leagues say they care about fairness, but only when it won't affect the bottom line. And if you're still not sure why Sophie Cunningham's post made so many waves, here's why. She broke the script. She refused to play along. She saw the gap between what the NBA says and what it does, and she called it out. And whether you agree with everything she said or not, there's no denying she lit a fire under a conversation that needed to happen. Because people are done accepting double standards. They're done pretending a $26 million salary while facing federal charges is just business as usual. They're done watching athletes who speak out get punished, while the ones under investigation get paychecks and protection. And maybe, finally, leagues will have to start listening. So what now? Does the NBA stick to its line and keep Rozier on the court? Does the public keep pressuring for real transparency? Do athletes in both leagues start demanding the same standards and consequences for everyone, no matter how big the name? The more you sit with it, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just about one player's salary or one angry tweet. It's about the machine behind it all. The leagues, the money, the optics, the silence. And how those things move in sync until someone disrupts it. Terry Rozier's $26 million contract, still untouched while he faces federal gambling charges, isn't just a headline. It's a pressure point. A clear line between how things should work and how they actually do. And Sophie Cunningham? She walked right up to that line and kicked it. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't code her frustration in vague terms. She called it what it is. Unfair. The kind of unfair that's been festering in professional sports forever. Dressed up in league statements and polished interviews, but rotting underneath. Because if the NBA can confidently say nothing to see here, while the federal government says we're charging this player with serious violations, then something is broken. And not in a subtle way. It's broken in a loud, blinding, we hope you're not paying attention kind of way. But guess what? People are paying attention now. This story didn't just strike a nerve, it hit a vein. Let's talk about what the NBA's handling of this case actually signals. It tells players that talent can outweigh accountability. That as long as you're good enough, profitable enough, watchable enough, everything else is negotiable. Legal charges? PR issue. League rules? Flexible. Ethics? Optional. It also tells fans something even worse, that their trust is less important than the bottom line. The NBA is banking on you forgetting. They always are. Every time a scandal happens, the league's playbook is the same. Run an internal review, issue a vague conclusion, keep the cash flowing. And in most cases, people do move on. But not this time. Not with Sophie Cunningham dragging this into the spotlight and forcing it to stay there. And when she brought in comparisons, troops, food pantry workers, the people grinding every day with barely livable wages, it wasn't for shock value. It was perspective. It was a reminder that while a man charged with federal crimes is pulling in $26 million with zero interruption, the people keeping society afloat are scraping by. It was never just about Rozier. He's the symptom, not the disease. This is about the leagues, the policies, the protective bubbles around male athletes, and the constant undervaluing of women in the same space. And yes, that includes influence. Because right as this drama unfolded, Cunningham also voiced her support for WNBA stars, particularly Caitlin Clark, having more say in team decisions. Another honest take. Another spark. Another round of people completely missing the point. The backlash came quickly. She hasn't earned that yet. Too soon. Let the coaches coach. But let's be honest. Those same criticisms never seem to apply to the NBA. We've watched LeBron James openly influence team direction for over a decade. Kevin Durant helped build and destroy multiple super teams. Even rookies with hype get input if they're valuable enough. But the second someone in the WNBA suggests a player like Clark, a once-in-a-generation talent, might deserve a seat at the decision-making table, outrage, resistance, debate. Why? Because women athletes are expected to be silent, grateful, obedient. They're praised for their hustle, but punished for their voice. And the minute someone like Cunningham says the quiet part out loud, people rush to shut it down. The double standard doesn't stop at salaries. It's baked into the culture. The idea that male athletes deserve influence and leeway, while women should be grateful just to be here. And Sophie's refusal to stay quiet about any of it is what makes this entire moment matter. It's not about being provocative for the sake of it. It's about refusing to let the system stay this lopsided without a fight. Because let's be honest, what would have happened if a WNBA player was hit with federal gambling charges? Would she still be playing? Still earning every dollar of her salary? Still backed by her league with a confident press release saying, "We found no wrongdoing"? Highly unlikely. More like immediate suspension, public distancing, a dozen think pieces about accountability in women's sports, and a massive spotlight on league ethics. But Rozier, he gets to keep hooping like nothing's happening. Like the feds didn't just file charges. And people are supposed to just accept that. That's the part that Cunningham couldn't stomach, that no one should be okay with. She's not alone. This controversy lit up because fans are no longer willing to swallow hypocrisy in silence. The same leagues that market themselves with hashtags about justice, progress, and equity are still protecting athletes the second accountability threatens their image. And don't forget, this is all happening while Congress is looking directly at the NBA, asking hard questions about how they handle internal investigations and whether they can be trusted as self-police. You can't make this up. On one side, the federal government is saying, "Here's what we found." On the other, the NBA says, "We looked too. We didn't see anything." And somehow, they expect that to be good enough. That's why this controversy isn't fading. It's growing. It's not just a scandal. It's a litmus test for how much people are willing to accept from their favorite leagues. How many contradictions they're willing to tolerate before finally saying, enough. Because here's what enough looks like. Enough letting internal investigations serve as PR tools. Enough paying athletes millions while they face serious legal accusations. Enough pretending that accountability and justice only matter when it's easy. Enough silencing women when they demand a seat at the table. Sophie Cunningham knew exactly what she was doing. She lit the match, and now the whole system has to answer for it. The league may not want to change, but the public pressure? It's real and growing. And if leagues like the NBA don't start listening, they'll lose something way more valuable than a player. They'll lose trust. So, here's the real question. Where does this go from here? Will Terry Rozier's case change how leagues handle legal issues moving forward? Will women athletes finally be allowed to influence the systems they keep afloat? Will fans keep holding sports organizations accountable when the branding doesn't match the behavior? You tell us. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who's done watching justice take a back seat to jersey sales. Like if you're tired of double standards being dressed up as process. And subscribe, because as long as power protects itself, there will always be another story to tell.